Welcome everybody. This Scrutiny Committee meeting is being conducted on a hybrid basis in accordance with the Local Government and Elections Wales Act 2021, which will operate alongside the Council's standing orders. Council standing orders and code of conduct will apply at all times during this meeting in the same way as ordinary meetings, and members should conduct themselves accordingly. A recorded version of this meeting will be uploaded for public viewing as soon as possible after the meeting. Cross-translation of the proceedings can be provided upon request. The images and sound recording may also be used for training purposes with the Council. Okay. Item 1 on the agenda is apologies for absence. We have a few.
Yes, Chair, from Councillors Alex Pym, Councillor Screen, Councillor Mockford and Councillor Bott.
Okay, any other apologies we should note?
That's it.
Fantastic. Any declarations of interest from any members? None? Okay. Item 3 on the agenda then is a recruitment and retention update. We have an officer presentation followed by questions and comments. The Cabinet member has joined us. Welcome, Councillor Deb Davis. I don't know if you want to say anything, Councillor Davis, or just hand over to officers to present the report. You're on mute.
Apologies, I intend to be with you in person this morning, but I got caught in Monmouthshire. I'm so sorry, I've only just got back into Newport. I'm more than happy to hand over to officers. This is a specific area which I'm really familiar with. I'm sure we'll come on to it, but Audit Wales have recently undertaken a specific focus on recruitment and retention within Newport, and we've all been appropriately challenged and questioned by the erstwhile body. So it's something that's been really, really high on our agenda in recent months. So more than happy to hand over to Kevin and Tracy. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, members. So if I just remind us of how we started looking at this, which was in the service plans a couple of years ago, so 22-23. A number of different areas have talked about some of the challenges they had around recruitment and retention. So at that time we came to Scrutiny in 2023 and talked about a lot of things that we were planning to do. At that time we just were at the start of our people plan, which is something that was looked at by a review and Scrutiny committee also. We didn't have that fully implemented or in at that time. So what I think yourselves asked for, but also useful for us, is to come back some couple of years later to say, how did that go? What does the people plan look like? What have we been doing? What has worked? Cabinet member mentions Audit Wales are also looking at this. They're looking at every local authority, that includes us. And we did talk to them about when might we get the report, because it might have been better to come here after that, but they couldn't give us a timeline, and therefore we thought, you know, we need to update you, we'll come back and update you. We can always share the Audit Wales for later. I think one of the findings from that, just from our observations in going through it, is Audit Wales are very focused on recruitment, and we think retention is as important as recruitment. So we'd like to talk about both. Clearly you need to do less recruitment if you retain people. So for us it's very much together. So there's a paper within your packs that you'll have seen, and perhaps if Kevin walks us through the key points and then take any questions. Thanks, Kevin.
So I'm not going to read the report verbatim. I pulled out some key points, and obviously we'll take some questions after. So as Tracy outlined, the main purpose is to update Scrutiny following the previous report in 2023, where we touched on things we were planning to do, or such that we had been doing, also the context of where we were as an organisation as well. So I suppose it's worth noting that actually the update today focuses predominantly on around the commitments we made in the people plan, which is a 5-year document from 2023 to 2028. And also, whilst the people plan drives a lot of HR activities, it also clearly links with things like the strategic equality plan the digital strategy and climate change, in particular those three, but there are others that the skills and the workforce actually look into as well. So the people plan has 4 themes: representation and transformation, employee wellbeing, employee engagement, and employee experience. Predominantly recruitment and retention sits in the employee experience theme. That said, as Tracy just outlined, everything we do to retain the employees is as equally important as trying to recruit. So the other 3 themes, particularly wellbeing and engagement, are equally as important to engage in the organisation and maintain a healthy workplace. In terms of the report, so I provided some high-level statistics really of the workforce just to outline, contextualise that a bit. So Newport is the fastest growing city in Wales, as you know, in terms of population. And on page 9 of the public pack, there's also some numbers there that represent the workforce is actually growing in Newport steadily over the last couple of years, last 3 years. And we currently have the time of the report a headcount of 5,927 staff, and that's gradually increased over the last couple of years. So in the context of Newport, growing city, growing workforce, which is possibly slightly different to some of our other local authorities around us and further afield. Despite the growth, Newport does have also the lowest staff ratio per FTE per 1,000 population. So we have the least amount of staff per 1,000 population, which obviously gives us a significant challenge in delivering services as well. Although, as I just touched, the workforce is growing, but it's not growing at a pace where it still remains the lowest in Wales. Workforce is predominantly female-based, around about 70-30 split. That changes year on year, but it's around those numbers each year. Turnover is around 10.5–11% each year, and they're noticed in the report as well as in the appendices. There's more details about service areas, specifically across NCC. It's around 10.5–11%. In 2023, just after coming to Scrutiny as well, we also introduced our new wellness at work policy. And we've seen some pleasing outcomes there in terms of supporting staff and also a reduction in the days lost per FTE as well. So over the last, in early 2024, specifically around recruitment, took a report to the senior team to diversify the resources in the HR team, so not additional resources, and move some resources into a strategic recruitment function. And that team started working with us in early 2025, so at this point they've probably come up to 12 month anniversary. And really that was to focus on how we can put more activity in specific recruitment activity, rather than the general team trying to pick up specifics as and when they came. So their focus over the last months has been on looking at our recruitment methods. What are we doing there? How do we recruit? What platforms are we using? Getting out into the community. What does our brand look like as we go to the council? What awareness is there? How do we attract different people? Those sorts of things. Also, our employee life cycles. Once people are here or are here, what are we doing for them? How are we maintaining and keeping that retention as high as possibly can be? So there's a number of achievements in the pack, particularly in the appendices, but I'll just outline a couple. So as I said, we established a dedicated team to support recruitment and retention challenges. That prompted a review of our workforce planning initiative. So workforce planning has been a thing that's been around for years and years, but actually we've prompted a review of how we're approaching that, developing some dashboards, using some metrics to support that activity. We've also started to look at what other opportunities there are to support the workforce with pay, so whether that might be a market supplement, reviewing critical roles, what can we do in those areas to attract and retain. So that might be linking with universities around internships, and there's various programs in the report noted, but one of those is linking with University of South Wales, as well as a couple of others. We've expanded the entry points opportunities by SPF funding providing 20 apprenticeships in 2024, it's 25, and now it's continuing in 2026. And a number of engagement activities. So we've changed our onboarding practices, we've changed into an engagement cycle. We've done stuff around staff benefits. We've been out in the community to try and attract different people, and we've enhanced our staff awards and recognition and those sorts of things. Lots of different things in the stuff we already have in place to be enhanced. We also utilise our staff networks as much as possible. So we have a couple of staff networks that we use, but the diversity, inclusion, climate change, loss language, all those networks inform how we shape and design some of our policies and processes. I've touched on values and behaviours, which sit in our people plan. These are our collective responsibility, how we should behave as an organisation, and the expectations we would expect back. Again, our staff networks have helped us develop new values and behaviours as part of our people plan in 2023, and really they underpin our workforce expectations and how we would approach things going forward, and they inform things like how we approach our values awards, or where we're putting good progress or recognition on, and things like annual long service awards and those sorts of things. In the report as well, we talk about agency staff. So agency staff, as noted in 2023, are part of our workforce, and we need temporary workers, now and then to support our work. We do regularly undertake review of how we use those. We do have corporate frameworks that we use to procure agency staff that schools and non-schools workforce do pick up from. But this year we undertook a strategic review of our agency provision, so getting into the details of what are we doing, what's that look like, where is it being used, is it being best used, is it providing best value, etc. And making sure people are on contract as much as possible. Ultimately, agency, we do require agency, so the premise wasn't about trying to get that spend down, it was that we're using it robustly and appropriately, what improvements can we make, as well as trying to reduce spend in the agency. As Tracy mentioned, all the Wales came in December, we met the team in January, we expect a report probably by the end of the financial year, and we report that back to committee. But I think that went well, and we're all waiting to see what those outcomes look like. They're doing that across the 22 local authorities to really try and identify best practice others to pick up and support as well. So I guess in conclusion, I think since 2023 we've made significant progress. I would say we've put a new resource in place to help drive that forward, a people plan in place, which clearly has a lot of emphasis on recruitment and retention. We do have hard to fill roles, challenging roles. We try and come up with solutions around those all the time. And again, the recruitment team and the wider HR team support any needs as and when. So, and I suppose the last point for me is that recruitment and retention is everybody's responsibility across the organisation. It's not HR, it's not senior leaders, it's everybody in the interaction with colleagues on a daily basis, create staff and environment that they like to deem Newcastle City Council's employer of choice. So it is everyone's collective responsibility.
Thank you. I will open the floor to questions, if that's okay. Yeah, go on, Councillor Perkins, sorry.
Are there any particular departments that struggle to recruit and retain?
So we undertake workforce planning every year, and that delves into what sort of horizon scanning takes place in that process. What are likely to be your difficult to recruit, as well as other things, but recruitment typically. What can we do to support that? If we're looking at potentially digital employees being required for the workforce in the next 5, 10, 15 years, and how we building that into your workforce planning exercise and trying to recruit and retain those. I suppose specifically to answer your question around where do we see the challenge around hard to fill roles, that is probably, if I summarise it, probably is social services, frontline care workers, and some of the professional roles around social workers. Similar story in schools in terms of the professional and the frontline workers, teachers, assistants, teachers, leadership roles. We do see challenges in there. You see smaller scale challenges like specific planning type roles or engineering type roles where there's perhaps a smaller pool of staff you're looking into, as well as recruiting a smaller pool. But I suppose broadly, probably social services and schools in those areas. We do have those challenges in those areas, but collectively, I don't think we have a split. We've never been able to recruit to those roles, and we can't recruit to those roles, which is stopping us from delivering the service.
Is it just saying that some cross-cutting things like Welsh language speakers, so there's some things that affect all departments. We need to work on an example of the Welsh language speakers, which is a challenge for everybody.
Okay.
Yeah, my question is to sickness. How long does an employee have to be on long-term sickness before they're referred to? Is it occupational?
Yes, we do use occupational health. So,
yeah.
But there's no set criteria of what intervention takes place at what point, I suppose, in terms of occupational health, well-being, check-in. What our wellness at work policy does is treat each case individually. So as soon as somebody does go sick, that policy is prompted suddenly. So there's things in there around what type of absence is it, and do they need a referral somewhere, or do they need some additional support? If this cold flu type stuff, then you're just going to have a general discussion with that person and support their well-being. If there's a longer term issue, then they would automatically go into the stages of the well-being of work policy, and they clearly outline some stages that are relevant to that absence. So we don't always default to occupational health. We try and hold a case management discussion internally, and that can include that individual who's absent, their manager, HR colleague, health and safety partner, not potentially all these people, but they can be part of the discussion, health and safety colleague, and also we can bring occupational health into that discussion to form a collective discussion around how we support their well-being, rather than just sending them out to the occupational health company and receiving a report back and trying to sit down with them and understand those issues. So there isn't a stock answer to what point you refer to occupational health. Is as and when it's appropriately deemed by the employee and the manager in a collective discussion of what support they might need, and then there are a number of other supports that we have to build across the organisation on occupational health.
Okay, that's helpful, thank you.
Councillor Pym, did you want to come in?
Yeah, if I could, please. Apologies, my camera's not working still. It's on and off. Let's see if I can just get it on again. Nope, no joy. I've turned white. Yeah, it was just regards to recruitment of positions. So I've been involved in a few meetings, and during my brief spell on the planning committee, there were concerns raised about the recruitment of planning officers in different kind of specialities. Is this something as a local authority that we're planning ahead with, and not just that department in particular, but certain skilled roles? Have we got a strategy on how we can recruit potential best candidates, and also whether there's anything that we can do as a scrutiny committee to take forward to improve this issue?
Yeah, so I think there's a number of examples across the organisation where we've got programs and processes in place to try and increase our workforce opportunities. So for instance, we got deliver an internal social work program where we put people through the training in the university with a view to supporting them into employment at the end of that. Sniffing around the planning one, the LGA and the WLGA are doing some specific activities around how they might support that discipline in particular. So that's a sector issue, because it's not just local government that struggles with it. There just aren't those people entering the profession. So there's a wider piece there across the LGA and the WLGA who are working on those activities. And those sorts of activities take place regularly, where there are peaks and troughs in employment. So we'll have the social care Wales programme where they're developing the next leaders out of care support roles into leadership roles. And there's probably specifically, when we developed our entry points apprenticeship programme in 2024 with SPF funding, we looked at some of those hard to recruit areas and how we can attract new entrants into that area to potentially develop them into the future roles where we're struggling to recruit and retain. But also we do a lot of work around structures and workforce and how we can position our roles as best to attract the right people and make sure there's a career progression opportunity. So make sure there's not all roles we can offer a career progression opportunity, but where we can, bring a junior person in, progress them into develop them, and potentially bring them into a more senior role in the future. So there's probably a number of activities out there that we're doing.
Okay, great.
I guess that might come up in the Audit Wales work as well, because they're doing the whole of Wales, so there might be some common themes that they may have recommendations that Wales government can do. Or good practice, good idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, you mentioned long-term sick, but how does sporadic sickness affect us, and what can we do around sporadic sickness?
Yeah, so short-term absence. So we have more instances of short-term absence than long-term absences, which you'd expect, but in longer term tends to take more days out of that employee or the council. So in the same way we manage that absence, as I described earlier, so all absences will go through that process in a wellness at work approach, which is clearly says at this stage you should be doing this, that, etc. And the employee can expect at this stage to receive X, Y, Z. But in terms of the short-term nature, there are some different indicators around how you best manage those absences. So if there are, for instance, 5 or more absences in the year, then you might want to hold a more formal wellbeing discussion with that person to understand if there's any specific needs they might require, or a reasonable adjustment plan. Whereas the long-term absence tends to, as that becomes longer, you automatically get into that discussion around reasonable adjustments and whatnot. But the analysis of 3, 4, 5, 6 absences happening in the course of 12 months, beyond the picture, we can start to consider, is there something else we could explore this employee?
And just on you said the frontline roles in schools and assuming teaching assistants, do we employ them for the full year, or do we only pay them for 39 weeks, I believe it is, of the school year?
Yeah, so teaching assistants, support staff, they're employed for the full year, but if they're physically working 39 weeks, plus their annual leave, plus their bank holidays, then they receive that proportionate pay over the course of the 12 months.
Do we retain them for the following year? I suppose is the question. There are some schools that they employ them for 1 year and then so they think about it.
Yeah, so if they're given a permanent contract, absolutely, we don't stop them end of July and then we restart them in September. If there will be instances out there where schools are issuing fixed-term contracts, say from January to the end of the term in April, Easter, and then considering whether they carry on after that. If they consider carry on after that, of course, we pay them a break as well.
We tend to give permanent contracts.
I was going to say, unless it's a temporary contract.
Unless it's to cover maternity and stuff.
Yeah. So if the school gives a contract for the 1st of September to the 21st of July, whether they kept them on to the 31st of August or not, the proportionate pay is the same difference. We would be asking the school not to end the contract on the 21st of July and continue that and then restart on the 1st of September. We will be picking up the conversation with the school if that was something we do.
Okay,
It's good to know. Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions?
Yeah, Chair, could I come in, please? I haven't got the hand function again, the raising the hand, sorry. Yeah, it was just regarding the family-friendly policy of Newport City Council. With the expected changes in employment law over the course of the year ahead, just wondering if we're going to be looking to revisit our family-friendly policy, assuming that there's one in place, and whether any improvements could be made, focused mainly on those that are remote working or working from home. You know, it's a luxury in this day and age to have kind of liaison officers and support officers for those who are working from home, but whether it's something that we could consider doing if we don't have one already in place that can kind of, you know, kind of touch in on a regular basis, not touch in, sorry, but kind of liaise and communicate with people working from home to make sure that they're doing okay. Because I think, as we all know, working from home has its benefits and perks, but it can also be a very lonely place if you're stressed out, or if your workload is kind of overtaking. It's creating kind of pressure that no one else can see and alleviate.
Yeah, I think there's a few things in there, Councillor Pym. So absolutely, we're all over the employment rights changes. We briefed CMT last week on, you know, the ones coming up, and also the ones that already happened. We've made those changes. So that the changes to the family-friendly provision that are coming in from April 26, absolutely, we'll be making policy changes to update our policies to reflect that. I suppose largely, I would say, in the totality of the employment rights proposals, largely we were in a position where we can make some minor changes to policies that will allow us to continue to deliver properly as we have. So, for instance, you know, we knew the antenatal changes were coming this year. Actually, we did that last year, and we made sorts of changes around paternity leave and maternity leave also last year, which goes back to the ability to, you know, advertise ourselves as an employer of choice, also respond to some of the legislative changes that are on the way. Some of those changes are a little unknown as well, so there's words in the employment rights bill, but some of that work still needs to take place around what's that look like. And I know ACAS are doing a lot of work trying to support employers, and we also link with the 21 authorities in Wales to obviously develop best practice and processes. I suppose the working from home stuff you mentioned, we've got a home working policy. We've had that for a number of years now, coming out of COVID. Actually, before COVID, obviously it was amended and enhanced coming out of COVID, and that clearly talks about people's well-being. Managers checking in with staff on a regular occasions, and also vice versa, staff checking in with managers. And also our wellbeing, a new wellness at work policy also has significant inroads into supporting wellbeing at work as well. Also this year we pulled together, again as some of it comes from this committee actually, around improving the check-in numbers that were taking place from across the organisation. So there's a clear policy that sets out that managers and staff should be meeting on a regular basis, discussing well-being stuff, but also objectives, performance, all those things. So I think it's embedded, and it's about trying now to use our staff engagement surveys that we do annually to test that and make sure that's working.
Chair, can I just come in just to follow that up? And again, this might sound a little bit wild, but is there a social room as such at the Civic? You know, I've not been. I know there's lots of offices, but is there kind of a gathering area? I mean, years ago there used to be a bar, and again, this is all things in the past, but somewhere where people can kind of pop in where it doesn't really feel like an office, even if it's just for an hour as a catch up with colleagues, whereby they can chat without it feeling so corporate or as kind of it doesn't look like an office. Is there anywhere like a wellbeing area within the Civic at the moment that for staff just to pop in and chat if they need to, or just kind of have a little bit of a break? A staff room, effectively, but without it being a staff room for work purposes, but just somewhere to kind of de-stress and take their mind off kind of work for an hour, whether they're working from home, where they can come in from home, or whether they're based in a Civic.
Yeah, so I think obviously, you know, the civic centre use and how we use the civic centre is, you know, continual conversation and how we best utilise that. I suppose I would say there's probably 3 spaces across the building that people use for those sorts of things. One is behind reception, where the vending machines and sort of seating area is. One is the old staff canteen. Obviously, doesn't provide food anymore, as you know, but it is a space that it is called a staff meeting space, I think, or something like that. That staff can use, and staff do use in the lunchtime and outside of the lunchtime. And then across the east wing in social services, they've got a drop-in space, again similar to the old staff restaurant, where they can, I think there's a table tennis table in there that you know, they can in their own time utilise that space, and there's some vending machines. So there are some across the civic centre. The civic centre doesn't have the footfall it used to have when there was a staff canteen, so you know, that's got to be balanced as well, I guess.
Yeah, I guess more widely, well, one thing to say is we encourage managers within our own practice and elsewhere to have days where all staff come in. So, you know, if you're coming in one day, there's no point in everyone else coming in another day. That's not very social, that type of thing. So we do encourage that type of teamwork. Obviously, we've got the check-ins that we work really closely on those keep in touch kind of. But we have to recognise the incredible challenges that are the civic centre currently, and I think more widely, and that this isn't quite a question you're asking, but more widely, if we want to be an choice, you know, the civic centre does present some challenges there, which we continue to review from an assets point of view. No easy answers there, but we're aware of that challenge.
Okay, Commissioner Perkins.
Mentioned reviews. I was going to ask about, are they monthly, 6 monthly, yearly, and do they ask the questions? You're finding out the employees that are quite happy in their job, the ones that are not quite so happy in their jobs, and the ones that do want to progress and where they want to progress, and what help then do we give them to make that progression?
Yeah, absolutely. So use the so our HR payroll system is iTrend. So we use iTrend to capture that information, and it clearly sets out the conversations taking place as well, or prompts the conversation that should take place. So managers should be holding a check-in conversation on at least a bi-monthly basis, although we recommend monthly. So there should be at least 6 formalised conversations a year rather than an annual review. The stats that come out of that, we're currently across the organisation is achieving around a 70% staff undertaking those. That's massively improved from around 28% a couple of years ago, and we'll be reviewing that now in April to actually see if that can be improved further. The conversation that so there's a policy also that has on this information and what should take place. But the idea behind using the iTrend system is that it prompts the conversation. So it says, how is your well-being? There's a box for the employee or manager to comment on. It says what are your personal development needs, and what would you do you want to progress? What does that look like? What training and development opportunities are available internally, externally? Obviously, sometimes they're not always available, and it might be appropriate for certain roles to be developing in that space. But those conversations happen on a regular basis. Also, the other bit of the check-in is around objectives. So staff should have objectives set across the organisation. So for me, they can come clearly with the people plan and the service area plan, and my objectives are set there. Tracy will obviously review them on a monthly basis and make sure I'm progressing those, etc. And that's the same across the organisation. I suppose we do have a learning and development directory as well, where staff can access to say this is the corporate offer of training that's available. So that involves management development programs. There's some more operational stuff around handling difficult conversations, those sorts of things, stress awareness, those sorts of things. There's a number of corporate opportunities in the L&D directory as well. Outside of talking, spending money,
So worth just saying, and there's also a sort of informal coaching scheme. Coaching scheme where people are trained as coaches, because not everything is best discussed with one's line manager. You might have some challenges that you just want to work on separately, so we encourage staff to access coaches across the organisation and self-develop in that way as well.
Yeah, so we had about 20 coaches across the organisation that staff can make a request to be coached by them. They do.
And that's open to all employees. That's good.
How does that process deal with sort of talent management and aspiring leaders and succession planning?
So we have a talent management framework that is actually as part of the plan is under review, but essentially there's three areas to that talent management framework. One at a more operational individual level, what is there for me, how can I access different things from there? One at a sort of middling level where we might have aspiring leaders or people wanting to step up to management at a senior level, and then more at high level senior leaders. So that is out there in the organisation. So people are looking at what development opportunities available for us. So that's that talent management framework. 3 tiers. I mean, it is a bit of one size doesn't quite fit all. It's set up in 3 tiers. What's available? What coaching and mentoring is one of those shadowing experiences that already exist. People can request to go and study a different bit of service or a colleague in their own service. We also run on an annual basis our NBA leadership development program. So we've had around since 2018. 15, I think, people go through that program. Normally about 2 or 3 a year. I've been through that program. I developed with that, a number of colleagues that. And you go away and study the MBA program, as well as internally get involved in senior activities and understand and engage and kind of learn by watching what goes on in the organisation. So we've had success in that. People have been promoted through recruitment processes into more senior roles, so there's clear evidence that has added value to the organisation. And then at a middling operational level, we've clearly seen people go on stepping up the program, stepping up the management program, and then progressing into management. Or actually, you also got right for some people that they haven't. So there are opportunities in there.
Okay. Any other questions?
Yeah, just one more from me, Chair, if that's okay. And it just comes down to agency workers. Again, if I'm honest with you, my sound's not the best here today, so I'm not sure if this. I don't think it's been mentioned, but just at the moment we've still got quite a lot of seasonal workers, depending on what is considered an important priority across the city. We took on a few more agency workers to deal with the issues around the overgrown grass in the cemeteries last year, and there may be other challenges ahead. Is there any way at the moment of looking at the better, either long-term recruitment of some of the better agency workers, or diversifying the skill sets of the staff that we've already got on the books, so instead of them just being recruited for that seasonal project or issue, as whether or not they could be taken on and offered kind of training to deal with some of the other seasonal priorities and issues that we encounter, and kind of that's more addressed to kind of highways at the moment. We've got kind of a need to get on top of our kind of roads and pavements. Is there any way of kind of upskilling some of the staff that we've got in other departments at the moment to help with that? And again, just a rolling programme of upskilling staff so that they're not limited to just one discipline or kind of a employment venture.
Yeah, I think some of our agency use is prompted by seasonal variances, as you've outlined, and actually the quickest route to recruit those people for a short period of time, because you don't potentially need them for the whole year, is via the agency. But actually, as you outlined, perhaps in the other months of the year, they could be somewhere else in the organisation supporting some other activity. That does become challenging around skills and the right skills, so to say multifunctional roles, and we do regularly have those conversations about utilising multifunctional skill, peripatetic, whatever type of employee you call them, across the organisation. So there will be examples of that in the organisation, such as some social services, for instance, where we're doing that. In the agency review this year, we have identified that you know, we have a lot of sickness cover or short absence cover, and actually can we over-resource the establishment instead of spending on agency spend? So some of those conversations are taking place in various service areas, and obviously we do come back to the kind of refuse, cleansing, gardening type areas where there is seasonal variations as well, and there will be reasons why they feel that's appropriate to recruit in that way. I think the Employment Rights Bill obviously has an element of changing the way we approach agency workers as well, and actually that will also prompt us to change some of the approach there as well. They're good points. I think they're a work in progress. We have got some activities around some areas around the points you make. And we also do have some roles in place in the organisation where we have done that as well. But yeah, I think we can do more with it.
Okay. The turnover figures, and it says for the last 2 years, so 25 and then 26. So just confirm that those reports are the financial year, April till March. Other than that, we're having a very bad 26.
I think I'd have to come back to you because I think because 26 wasn't available, I've done January.
So you can the turnover for the last 2 years has been 10.72% for 2025 and is 10.25% for 26. So
yeah, you answered my question there. So I've gone so that is 12-month number for 25-26 and 24-25.
So it's April to March financially.
No, it's not April to March, so it doesn't give that.
January to December.
Yeah,
January to December. Right, okay.
So it's a 12-month comparison in both.
Okay. And then the figures for the sickness absence have continually dropped since 2023, so that's good to see. So we must be doing something right.
The wellness and work policy, I think, approach there.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Any other questions from the committee?
No, Chair. No, Chair.
That's okay. I'm going to change it, John. No, sorry. So headcount has increased by 70, nearly 80, I think, from 25 to 26. But the full-time equivalent's only gone up by like 10 employees. And that seems like there's a lot of part-time roles. Is that because we've been counting roles in like midday supervisors and cleaners and stuff like that? So actually, they're doing very small number of hours, and then when you equate them up together, employees, where are we? Agency costs. Do you know how much of that is schools?
Yeah, so
as a percentage of the total?
It's approximately half of that is schools and half of that is non-schools. I can give you the exact figure when you do the review, but it's approximately half and half, more weighted towards schools. So it could be 55% schools, 45%. It's around about half and half.
And in terms of people plan, have we got any sort of measures of what success looks like for it? So it's been in for 2 years, 3 years, nearly 23, wasn't it? I think it was launched in April 23 from memory, or June 23. Have we got any measures of sort of impact at all on that?
So a number of those actions that are given to the people plan go into the service plan each year. And some of them are more tangible than others, and they're clearly measured. So it says, roll out a new policy in X, Y, Z, clearly the outcome is we did that. What impact is it having is the second stage of that, which is more challenging to measure. But there are measures out there, like things like checking the process and making sure absence is going the right way, the wrong way. So there are some specific measures, but they're not all of them have measures. So.
Okay. And in terms of the strategic recruitment team that you've got now, the sort of designated team, do we know yet what outcomes that's had? I mean, I could give you anecdotal feedback that I think, you know, that the brand has improved, the adverts have improved with the sort of way that they are and what we're looking for and what you get and stuff like that all feels, you know, much more like a sales pitch than probably previous. So, how are we measuring some of that success in terms of the change of team and stuff?
Yeah, I think some of that is harder to measure, but it feels like, as you said there, there are some specific things that we can measure. So we're trying to go back on the, you know, time to recruit to roles, for instance. You know, I think it was 72 days potentially between the advert going out and the start. Have we improved that? Was that due? But we also, it's not in place yet, but we're also introducing a similar to the exit interview, actually, what was your starting process? Like, did you have good experience? Where could we improve? So again, that gives some specifics. Things like we have invested, for instance, in a LinkedIn recruiter license this year. Actually, have we had success from that? Yes, no. Clearly, we're going to get is that a return on investment or not? There are a few things like that. Like we've been to a couple of community recruitment events, for instance, where we have the paint firm, and you know, they're small numbers, but we have made go. Actually, what was the outcome of that? How many people do we see? So when we go along, for instance, we'll take an iPad and we'll put an iPad and sign people up to the jobs page. What are you interested in? Actually, we hopefully in the new year can then see what has happened to those people from that event. Did they apply for a job? Did they get from the process? So again, there is some things we can do next year to try to track the
One of the things you could measure is the number of applicants as well, isn't it? You know, by you increasing the number of, well, perhaps it's the number of quality applicants. I'm not sure how you deal with quality, but yeah, you know, do they meet the number of people that are shortlistable then shortlistable applicants? Is a measure you can look at. Yeah.
One of the interesting things I think about the Audit Wales review is they were really sort of pushing on that return on investment, the sort of ROI. How do you know that worked? How do you know that worked? And actually that is challenging because we've made a number of changes, even if we can evidence of that. Which thing was it? Was it the LinkedIn license? Was it going to the fairs and so on and so on? I'd be interested actually if they've got any good practice from anywhere else. That would be helpful to us, I think. But my gut feel, our gut feel is that it is not any one thing, it is the combination of it all. It's kind of water, drawing people to its council. But very difficult to equate that right back to the ROI. And I guess important to note, because we said the same to Audit Wales, is that new team was on existing resources, so there's no additional investment. We took people, we're doing different HR roles and we've used them in a different way. They are new actually, but we've reinvested existing resources. The actual additional external spend is much more limited. But that's
I think some of the best feedback we've had is from your colleagues in elected service in CMT.
That's right.
You know, I couldn't recruit this, couldn't see through the woods and, you know, how to design the job, how to get the advert in the right place, etc. This team's come in, we looked at it, we reinvigorated it, and I managed to recruit. Things like that.
Yeah, we've definitely seen a reduction in so-called hard to do things, somehow less hard to do. It'd be really interesting to see what people say when they come back on their service plans, because if we go dial all the way back to 2023, a number of people came to the table and said, I got this challenge.
Yeah.
Less people listened to most of them, less people said at this time there were other challenges. You know, where we are eradicating our hotspots is one of the questions, isn't it? Sorry.
And that's useful because that you know that that's working then, and you're seeing a positive. In terms of the events that you said we paid to attend as a council, have we run any events and been the lead where we have then?
So working skills run events regularly, so council working skills, and we go along to those. So specifically the HR team run them, no, but the council does run them.
Okay, yeah. In terms of then apprenticeships, do we know how many of those secured permanent roles at the end of the apprenticeships? I presume some are at the end.
Yeah, so we had 20 in 2024. We now have 5 remaining, and they will gain employment. Majority of those are in the council, some of those are not. But we did add those people to enable us to go out into the city to find a job, if not with us. And the 5 remaining, we're hopeful that we obviously will find them employment as well with the areas that we're interested in too. So they, obviously it comes via SPF funding, and you have to evidence grant-wise what they gain something from that. Obviously, if it wasn't the fact they had gained employment, they'd be gaining skills, experiences, qualifications through the apprenticeship program as well.
And is HR offering apprenticeships?
HR, so we have had an apprentice who also gained employment in the team, and also Tracy's service now has got a lead apprentice, so we're sharing that amongst the service and rotating around. So in April we will have another apprentice currently in the service and Tracy.
The report talks about pay and market supplements, and I sort of raised previously. Has that, and it sort of says you've used it and reviewed the way that we do that, has that been successful? How many roles are attractive? And will we have an opportunity to look at the new Cymru, to kind of look at those roles, because if that's an arm's length body, they may be able to sort of offer better terms and conditions for some things that perhaps the council can't within its rigid pay structures.
Yeah, so it was only until this year that we not needed to use the market supplement policy. The market supplements have a risk that need to be looked at, particularly assessed and continually assessed. So until this year, we didn't have any market supplements. We've now got 2. And they go through rigorous processes where the executive will sign them off or not, and they're implemented. They're time bound, they're reviewed each year, and subject to market forces reviews. Answer the cousin family.
Yeah, nice. That is an interesting one. I think what that probably looks like is we wouldn't kind of utilise that organisation to employ a person.
No, you have to do a service.
That's right.
Yeah.
So absolutely. So if we have certain services that we currently provide, or in fact don't, and we can branch out into that new thing, we wouldn't rule out using Cynghorydd as a local authority owned company. It currently does property services and related things. It could do other things. It could do other things, and it has its own pay structure. It could have a different pay structure. Side note, we provide some of the payroll and other HR services, and we've done a lot of recruitment for the new company to support them, and that's been a successful learning opportunity. So there's some learning that goes back and forth, which I think is really healthy. But in the future, yes, we could use that model to provide a service which then has its own, shall I call it, bespoke conditions of service. There are some rules around that, what we do about pensions, what we do about obviously with the NGC rules and so on and so on. But it does provide us with that option, absolutely.
And in terms of that sort of new company and working together. In terms of internal and external applications, I see lots of other local authorities prescribe internal only applicants, whereas we don't generally sort of do that so much, I think, from the website. So is that company classed as an internal for applications so that people can go across the route? And would that be a useful thing to do because you work really closely with them and you recruit them and do HR and everything else? And what percentage of applicant or job posts do we put out as internal, or do we generally go external?
I'll do the first bit. So, no, it's a different company currently. Would that be of interest? Not sure. We try and advertise externally and invite. We want to be really clear to the community and the population out there, people looking for jobs. We're looking for people to come and join us. We do want to give out that message. Generally, where there's internal only these days, correctly, it will be around, sometimes there are restructures, or we have staff displaced from another area, and clearly we've got to look both to protect our existing workforce and protect the council's finances about how we, securing people to stay is better than the next. So we try to use that proportionately. I guess most of the examples will fall into that bracket. I don't know the numbers.
No, I don't know the split numbers, but it is the vast majority go external. I can get you.
No, it's the exact numbers. My impression is that most go external.
Yeah.
Lots of local authorities, you look on their websites and most of their jobs go.
Yeah.
And they often advertise on LinkedIn as well. So I always share the adverts from LinkedIn.
We've done a lot better there.
Yeah.
I mean, one of our learnings sort of early on in the people plan, we worked a lot with staff in the staff network groups. I mean, we want to be representative. One of the people plan strands is being representative of the community we serve. So lots of different people from lots of different backgrounds. And there was sort of that view of the council's jobs are all internal or all something like that. That just isn't the case, and we've worked really hard on making clear that isn't the case, and that we are seeking for people to apply and look for jobs with us. We want to recruit the best talents and a mix of people from the area.
Yeah.
Well, and also we're a growing workforce, so actually we do need to go out and find new people because
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, there should always be an external one at the end of the process, but yeah.
Yeah, if we were shrinking, it would be different, wouldn't it? Yeah, that's a really good point. Because although if you look at those bars, our numbers per population are staff-wise lowest in Wales. The number of people you employ continues to work because the population continues to grow at such a rate. That's right. Helpfully and healthily.
Okay. How have you used sort of transformation in digital in sort of employee recruitment, and particularly AI and the opportunities that brings to enhance recruitment and probably retention a little bit? Is that playing a part at all at the moment, or is that early stages?
I think so. Largely, nearly all of our recruitment goes through the online portal. That is your experience. You apply there, you get shortlisted, or you get rejection letter or shortlisted letter. You on board there. You have access to our policies and guidance and your onboarding process, induction, probation period, all those things that are done through that web portal. That isn't the case in the local authorities. And Newport does consider itself to be quite advanced in the use of that technology to do that through iTrend. There are some activities around the onboarding process, around automation, probably more so than AI that we're looking at currently around speeding up DBS checking, for instance, reference checking, so that we can again improve that experience with the onboarding process and enhance that area there. We have looked at, although the tech wasn't quite as good as advertised, I suppose. The ability for technology to do shortlisting for you based on the job criteria. So we're in the early stages there, maybe I would suggest. But there's some things we're doing around using Teams and Copilot for engineering. We just record the notes rather than type them up, and some kind of automation AI stuff. So I think we're really in that. What can AI give the recruitment process? But there's certainly some automations that we're already doing.
So we might see some of that in your team plans going forward, perhaps.
Is there an application? So the sorts of things, a bit more basic, but because it's not the automation end, we are keen to make the application process as simple as possible. Do we need application forms for all jobs, or is there another form of application? You know, we're looking at those kind of things as an
I think it's in the report, I didn't mention it.
Yeah,
so
thanks.
we're looking at so we've just got one application form at the moment, fundamentally, as you know, it can become some jobs. So we're reviewing whether a more entry level job is just a questionnaire. Is it yes or no? You know, and actually, is there a CV process for some jobs, and then is there a supporting statement for other jobs? So again, what that does in terms of automation and AI, particularly the drop down stuff, is it helps sift quickly who is a suitable candidate for a role rather than the manager spending quite a large amount of time going through 10 pages worth of an application form times 20 odd people that apply for it.
Yeah, it's a really good point, that, because you need different things for different types of jobs and different types of skill set, and it's something because we've started to use LinkedIn in work to try and recruit, but people just hit the apply button there, which sort of just sends their CV, and then we've used Indeed on a bit of stuff, and you don't even get that, and you get sort of the other stuff. We say, if you put a covering letter in with your CV, and if they don't do the covering letter, are they disqualified automatically? Because if you look at the CV, they might be pretty good and have got the skill set, so it's kind of like, and I'm a bit of a stickler for kind of, well, if you can't read the advert which says you've got to send a covering letter, there's a bit of a problem in there. So it's kind of that, but there is a kind of that whole application process where lots of that stuff could probably find out at the back end. Once you've kind of done the interview and decided it's suitable, so yeah, it is probably worth sort of thinking about it. Yeah, it's a good point.
And trialing that for certain roles, which is what's kind of in the next phase. And you're right, that will come through this service that when we start to get into that.
Final one from final two actually. In terms of, there's not much data in the report, not a criticism, just an observation in terms of sort of age of workforce and stuff. But the question around that is, are we vulnerable to losing sort of key institutional knowledge by sort of any people, particularly those roles that are hard to recruit where, like where you said planning or social worker, you might have sort of several people who've been here for their 11, 30 years or whatever. That you at the door, we've lost a lot of that knowledge about the organisation or buildings.
Yeah, I got some stats here actually. That's the question. So our largest age group in the workforce is between 35 and 44. That's around 27%. Followed by that is 25 to 34. So actually, our predominant in our workforce is the younger generation. There will always be, I'm sure, knowledge at the higher end that isn't going to extract that knowledge into the next people. But actually, probably not that significant population, because that wasn't probably younger. Not every school's supporting that as well, potentially, because they're included in those numbers. Our 60 and over is around 11% of our workforce, so not a significant number compared to the rest of the population. I think what we try to do through the workforce planning process is there's also a succession planning process that managers can use. It's not mandatory, they can use it, they don't have to use it every year, but clearly if you've got some thoughts about people potentially retiring or some new skills coming into the team that you've never had before, you need to map that out. What does that look like? Who's the next person for this role, etc. Then there is a succession planning template I think for managers to map that out, plan the activities that they want to take in the next couple of years to make sure that either that knowledge is moved to where it should be, or the skills are changed in the team.
Okay, final question. You talked about being an employer of choice earlier, whenever you said those words, I think. What does that actually mean? And how do we measure whether we are one?
And then measuring it is challenging. Yeah. But I think for me, the employer of choice is actually recognising that council is one of the biggest employers in reported on.
I think we are the biggest
behind NHS, but potentially, actually that's my go-to. I know they're a good reputable employer that is out there in the environment, and people actively, to us for their job to employ people. So that's that.
And also people who work here.
Yeah,
I think,
yeah.
which we mustn't forget about.
Well, they're your brand ambassadors, aren't they?
That's right.
So, yeah.
Proud to work for the organisation, proud to be part of that organisation, so that continues. We don't just attract new people.
You want people to come to work as a choice rather than just finding a job.
That's right.
Absolutely.
Right.
I choose to want to work for the council and stay. And there used to be an expression years ago when I first started work, was job for life was with the council. It's different to that now, isn't it? You don't hear that so much now, probably because there's so many reorganisations and restructures and cuts to services, particularly over the last sort of 15 years or so. So that's been harder. But it would be nice to get back to that point where people came and made a career working for the council, where they, or they went on, because turnover's small numbers, healthy, probably 10% is a reasonably healthy number anyways, that you want to be static, but you want people to be progressive through the organisation and
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And we talked just on that note, we've talked a lot today about kind of niche professional roles, haven't we? People who are social workers, people who are engineers. Well, clearly, people who are lawyers. You're clearly not going to come in and then veer off and do something else. But there's an awful lot of other people who come in to do a kind of admin or management role. I think one who then train to do all sorts of different things. Local government does offer opportunities to move into different specialisms for the, if I call them, non-professionals. Who can, and not many organisations provide that opportunity actually to work in education and then later digital and then later HR or whatever that looks like. So that anyone's listening.
Yeah, absolutely. You
You
tend to see that's why the customer contact email always sort of struggle to recruit, because those tend to be struggle to keep staff, because those tend to be lower paid jobs and people start off there and then they learn a bit about sort of council tax or whatever. Councillor Davis, sorry, do you want to come in?
Yeah, I wanted to very specific. Thank you very much for that. I want to specifically talk about education. I suppose it's my remit as well, and I know education within Newport. And I think what we're particularly proud of in Newport is our succession planning, in that we keep our teachers. They don't necessarily stay within the same school, but then move on to another school, usually for progression purposes, whether it's onto deputy headship. And we see that constantly through Newport. These our teaching staff and our head teachers across Newport intimately know each other really well, because they've worked with each other in different places within Newport. Particularly, I would say that's both in it is both in primary and secondary, but very, very particularly in primary. But that reflects the I suppose, sense of job worth, job satisfaction, and the fact that we support our teaching staff well in Newport, so we don't get that loss necessarily to other local authorities, or actually potentially lose our teachers to other professions as they are in other local authorities. And I think it's a real positive to be proud of.
Yeah, totally agree. Any other questions?
Then for me, Chair.
Fantastic. So we need to just wrap up. Any sort of comments or recommendations, I guess. Things sort of jumping out to me, to be honest. So hopefully you can help me.
Well done, Chair. Maybe request that there comes recommendations from the board where along with proposed actions being provided when they're available. Mentioned requesting a breakdown be provided showing what proportion of the agency expense relates to in regards to schools and the total agency spend.
The total agency spends in there, and I think 17 million, 18 million.
Yeah, it was the schools proportion.
Yeah.
And the audit Wales, that's
And just comment that decreases falling in sickness numbers.
Yeah.
From that show, is there any comments or recommendations the committee would like to make?
Sorry, what's that?
Any other recommendations or comments?
No, just that it was good to see that they were dropping and keep up the good work in that. Sickness.
There was Councillor Pym's point, he's left us now, but there was his point about looking at opportunities for the seasonal workers to recruit those and change skill sets. I don't know if that's a recommendation or not really.
If you'd like to use a comment, we can note that. So.
Yeah, I can take that to the service.
Yeah, and you said that you've been looking at that anyway. Yeah. Okay.
because it's being proportionate by way of something.
Exactly. Yeah.
We don't wait for those opportunities.
It is a life to it, and of course I made the point in the pre-week that that carries a budgetary yes, there might be a saving on the agency spend versus taking the person in house, but if you employ them on 12 months rather than 5 or whatever it is, it's easy. 7 months to find. So if we go back to the cabinet and say we need some extra money to do that anyway, so it's a balance, isn't it? Really? So
it is, and a great agency when used well is really effective and can be more cost effective and more suitable. That's it's not being used. For circumstances.
And that also suits some people as well, doesn't it? Some people like to work in that way, so
yeah, and the 18-19 million agency spend is some additional money, probably it's because we've covered sickness or normally, covering vacancies or grants that schools have come in or additional money.
Anything else?
Mentioned about the measure of shortlisted applicants.
I did talk about that, didn't I? The way to measure sort of success of the recruitment team is around increasing the number of shortlistable applicants.
Yeah.
If you've never measured it before, it'd be hard to then.
Yeah, you obviously like as well. So how many care people did you get last year compared to this year? There could be all sorts of factors that those.
Yeah.
Can I add to that? A factor as well in recruitment in regard to shortlisting is sometimes it can be really dependent on the time of year that you're putting a job application out. And looking at teaching, for example, if you're putting an application out that would start in the beginning of a new school year, you're probably going to get more that are shortlistable. Whereas if you're putting out that for a job that you potentially want to start at Christmas or at Easter, you often find it's hard to recruit because of that timing. So that sometimes could be that added factor in regard to how many people apply and therefore how many you then will be able to recruit shortlist from that. There's so many subjective reasons as to why you get that shortlistable number at different times of the year and varying on job description and what you're actually doing. It's a difficult one.
I would say it's relatively, it should be there for us to provide that. I'm not sure what's going to.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure. Yeah, I think the comment is just around the team giving some thought to how they might measure the success of the introduction of the recruitment team rather than anything specific, to be honest.
Yeah. Exactly. We discussed some of that might do the audit.
Yeah,
that's great.
Okay. Yeah. Anything else?
No, that's all I've got. Yes.
Anything else from anybody else? Okay, thank you very much for your time. We just got to finish the Scrutiny Advisor report. So thank you both and thank you, Councillor Davis.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye. Must be quick with this. Guessing. All right, Scrutiny Advisor reports over to you, Neil.
Just advise that actions and outcomes tables, and they have been updated. We're still chasing up a couple of the outstanding ones. As soon as we get updates on those, we'll email the committee with them and update our tables. As we said, in bringing the full work programme, myself, Sam, and we will be taking this week with directors and heads of service to discuss topics for the upcoming draft annual forward programme for the year. What we do, once we get the topics, we'll bring it to the committee and we'll actually discuss if there's anything that the committee would like to raise to discuss. For the that's our forward work programme up to date for the year.
Fantastic. You know, on the actions pages that you put in,
Yeah.
do you think we could colour code them? So if you've got a tick for complete,
Yeah.
could that be a green, an ongoing be amber, and an outstanding would be red?
Mhm.
It'd be much
Like
easier
traffic
to.
system, yes. Yes, so it's just,
I think it'd be much easier to capture which ones are kind of outstanding and which ones are done. Is that all right?
You don't have that word, but Sam,
Yeah.
I can't really have it. That shouldn't be a problem.
yeah.
Yeah. Fantastic. Awesome. Okay, meeting closed. Oh, sorry.
Anything.
Oh, minutes. I was forgetting minutes of the previous meeting. Okay, minutes of the previous meeting. That was the 19th of January, and that was the budget meeting, wasn't it? Yeah, draft budget meeting. Everybody happy that the minutes are a true record?
Yes.
Yeah. Saying perfect. Right, now we can close.